back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and once again, you might have the wrong card in your commander deck, or at the very least, it might not be working the way you expect it to. So again, this is sort of a combination of the specific wrong interaction with a card and a commander, and I look at EDH Rec here a lot with seeing how many of these cards are actually going into these decks, but also just some rules clarifications in general, folding into all of my rules videos. So if you're interested in any of those other rules clarifications, I have a playlist there for you guys to check out. It might help your commander games to run a little more smoothly. So again, all of this stuff is coming from your guys' comments that I've seen in previous videos. So I'm starting out with Tangarth First Mate, and someone had commented about attack triggers. There's way too many stuff dealing with attack triggers with Tangarth First Mate. So I checked out the page on EDH Rec, started looking through some cards that don't really work with your commander. I mean, maybe they kind of do, maybe they kind of don't. Tangarth is a difficult one because, of course, you can be attacking with it yourself, right? Or your opponents can be attacking with it, all right? So let's look at this ability. Whenever an opponent attacks with one or more creatures, if Tangarth is tapped, you may have that opponent gain control of Tangarth until end of combat. If you do, choose a player or planeswalker that opponent is attacking. Tangarth is attacking that player or planeswalker. So anything that is dealing with attack triggers works perfectly fine if you're the one attacking, right? So if it's your creature, obviously it's your commander, you swing with it at somebody, anything that is going to trigger on the declare attackers is going to work just fine. But with any of your opponents, like with your commander's actual ability, when you use that ability, there is no declaring of attacking going on. You're not declaring as an attacker because, of course, it's not even your turn, and your opponent isn't doing it as well. It's actually triggering upon your opponents declaring their own attackers. So when you use your commander's ability for your opponents, when you're giving your commander to your opponents for them to attack each other with, anything that triggers on attacking isn't going to work. It's not going to work for you, and it's not going to work for your opponents. So if your opponent has something that triggers on a creature attacking, that doesn't work with the Tangarth when you give it to them, and it's not going to work for you either if you have something that triggers when a creature you control attacks, because your commander is not being declared as an attacker on your opponent's turn. You can only declare it as an attacker on your turn. You're just giving it to your opponents, and it's already tapped and attacking, so nothing that says when this creature attacks will trigger. I'll give the example of Shiny Impetus. So this is maybe used to goad another creature, but if this is used on your commander, it says whenever enchanted creature attacks, you create a treasure token. So if this is on your commander and you're giving it to your opponents with the hopes that you're going to get that treasure token, you will not. Another thing that doesn't work here is a card like Sticky Fingers, which is in quite a few decks. Enchanted creature has Menace, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Now, giving your Tangarth Menace is fantastic because Tangarth also says can't be blocked by more than one creature. So if a creature says that and then you give it Menace, that means it can't be blocked by more than one creature, and it also has to be blocked by more than one creature, which of course means it can't be blocked. So giving your Tangarth Menace is fantastic. However, this other part that says whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token, that will not be you, okay? Now, of course, if you're attacking with your commander, that's fine, but whenever you give control of something to someone else, you have to be very careful with the wording on the card. I talked about this with Sword of the Animist in sort of my rules misconception short, where if someone gains control of your creature that has Sword of the Animist on it, whenever that creature attacks, it's still your equipment. You're still going to go get that land and put it into play. But with Sticky Fingers, it's the exact opposite, okay? Whenever you see on a card the quotations, enchanted creature has this ability with the quotations in it, you essentially imagine those words actually printed on the card, right? So with Sticky Fingers, you're imagining that Tangarth has that wording on it. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. And of course, if your opponents control your Tangarth, when they connect with Sticky Fingers on your commander, they're going to create the treasure token because it is currently their creature. They're controlling it. So any ability that that creature has, they're going to get the benefit from it. So they're creating a treasure token from the Sticky Fingers, not you. Similarly, Snake Umbra, which I see is in a lot of those Tangarth decks as well, is the same way. In quotations, it says, whenever this creature deals combat damage to opponent, you may draw a card. That is whoever is controlling Tangarth. So if this is on your Tangarth, when it connects, attacks, your opponent will get to draw the card if they're currently controlling your commander. So do these cards work? I mean, in some situations they do. When you're controlling your own commander and swinging with it, you'll get to draw the card or create the treasure token or whatever. So there's a lot of situations where some of these cards might actually work and some of them might not. Again, the attack trigger thing for sure doesn't work. On your turn, if you're attacking with your commander, it will, obviously, because you're declaring it as an attacker. But any other time you're giving your opponents your commander, any attack triggers won't work. So gotta be careful there. Let's talk about specifically a card, Horn of Greed. Not a commander necessarily, but this is certainly a popular card in the format. It's in a lot of commander decks. 3-mana artifact. Whenever a player plays a land, that player draws a card. So the wording here is very specific. Whenever a player plays a land, and this wording is also on Deep Gnome Terramancer, which if you want to know how that card works, it is in the exact same way, okay? Playing a land, and the wording has changed here, it never used to be this way, but playing a land means you play your land for turn, okay? So on my turn, typically on my main phase, I get to play 1 land per turn. That's what everyone usually does. Now, of course, if you have an exploration effect on the board, that means you get to play an additional land on your turn, right? So if I have a Horn of Greed and an exploration, I play my land for turn, I get to draw a card because I've played a land, and then I get to play another land per turn because of my exploration, and I will then draw another card off my Horn of Greed. However, where it doesn't work is if I put a land into play any other way, just like with Deep Gnome Terramancer. So if I play my Misty Rainforest on my turn, I get to draw a card off a Horn of Greed. When I crack it to go get another land out of my library and put it directly into play, I'm not playing a land. A land is entering the battlefield, so any ETB effect will trigger, like any landfall effect will trigger, but I'm not actually playing a land, so I do not get to draw a card off of my Horn of Greed. So of course, a deck where Horn of Greed works really, really well is a Souza Lost But Seeking, which it is in almost 60% of decks on EDH Rec. Fantastic fit there because, of course, you get to play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. So every time you're doing so, let's say you're playing 3 lands per turn, you can draw 3 cards per turn. Fantastic fit there. But in any other landfall deck, and I'm not saying it doesn't work, but you just have to be careful, right? It's in a whole lot of decks here with landfall type of commanders, like Hazazon, for example. It's in 18% of those decks. And yeah, you're playing lands from your graveyard, but are you playing an extra land, right? If you're not playing an extra land per turn, Horn of Greed's not really giving you any advantage at all. Your opponents are getting the exact same advantages that you're getting, right? Even if you're returning lands from your graveyard to play through some other way, you're not getting an advantage there. You really have to play more than 1 land per turn in your deck, or you're not getting any advantage, not any more advantage than your opponents from your Horn of Greed. If you're casting a Rampant Growth, Kodama's Reach, I cast Splendid Reclamation and return all the lands from my graveyard to play, you will draw 0 cards off of your Horn of Greed, right? So you just have to be careful there. By the way, I see it is in 34% of all Sheoldred the Apocalypse decks. Fantastic fit, right? There's a commander where you wouldn't normally think to play it, but you want your opponents to draw cards. Fantastic fit in that deck. All right, let's move on to Chun Li Countless Kicks, which is another one that I had suggested to me in the comments, and I just talked about this in my video where they did the reprint of these cards. So it actually is now Zethi Arcane Blade Master. So actually, if you try searching up Chun Li on a lot of databases now, you're going to come up with Zethi Arcane Blade Master, and you might be wondering why. That is because that's the sort of official reprint of that card now, the non-Street Fighter version. And as I alluded to in that video, I was going to cover this in the next Wrong Cards video, and I am doing so. And the wrong card that people have in a lot of that decks is Twinning Staff. Twinning Staff is currently in 12% of all Chun Li or Zethi decks, and it just seems like a really great obvious fit, but it actually doesn't work at all, right? So Twinning Staff says if you would copy a spell 1 or more times, instead copy it that many times plus an additional time. You may choose new targets for the additional copy. That just seems like a slam dunk in this deck, right? Well, actually it's not. It doesn't work at all, in fact, because what Chun Li or Zethi's ability says is whenever Zethi attacks, copy each exiled card you own with a kick counter on it. You may cast the copies. So again, the wording is so important here. And like I point out all the time, you have to look for that word card, okay? Whenever you see the word card, that means something specific, and what it doesn't mean is a spell, okay? A spell is not a card. Anything that is referring to a spell means that it is on the stack. Anything that is a spell is going to be on the stack, just like with a counterspell, right? Whenever you counter target spell, that means you are countering something that is currently on the stack. A card is not a spell. Pretty much everything I think that isn't either a permanent or a spell is considered to be a card. Maybe I'm getting a little off topic here, but with Zethi, it says you copy each exiled card. You're not copying spells here. So Twinning Staff doesn't work at all because Twinning Staff says if you would copy a spell one or more times, you're not actually copying any spells with your Zethi or Chun Li. You're copying cards and then you're casting the copies. And again, very specific wording there where you're actually casting them. So does Twinning Staff work at all? I mean, I guess you could use it. It does have that 7 mana tap, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. So that part does work, I guess. But the first part, which I think is likely why people are putting it in that deck, isn't going to work with your Zethi at all. And similarly, another sort of universes within or crossover set commander, Soundwave Sonic Spy, is another one I got where Twinning Staff doesn't work at all. It has very similar wording. Whenever one or more creature tokens you control deal combat damage to a player, exile target instant or sorcery card with mana value equal to the damage dealt from their graveyard, copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. If you do, convert Soundwave. So the wording here is even more confusing, but again, what are you copying? It says copy it. You're not copying a spell because it hasn't been cast yet. And the reason why you know that is because it says you may cast the copy, right? So if you're copying something and then it says you may cast the copy, that means you're not copying a spell. You are exiling that instant or sorcery from their graveyard, copying it. So you're copying the card and then you're casting the copy. So again, you're not actually copying a spell here. So this will not trigger your Twinning Staff. Doesn't work there. I don't know how many people have Twinning Staff in their Soundwave decks. Looks like there's 249 Soundwave decks on EDH Rec already. So that's pretty good. Not sure how many people are putting Twinning Staff in there, but that doesn't work there as well for the exact same reason. And I'm going to end off today with something that isn't necessarily a wrong card, but what I think is just a really bad fit. And that is Hanata Dawn Crowned with Crackle with Power. And I actually did a Hanata deck on my Deck Doctor for one of my patrons and originally saw Crackle with Power like a lot of people and thought, wow, what a great fit that is with Hanata. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, actually, I don't think that's a great fit at all. What Hanata I found really wants more than anything is X spells that target, yes, but specifically spells that only have 1 X in their mana cost, right? So Heliod's Intervention, for example, you have the 1 X, so X target artifacts and enchantments. Well, guess what with Hanata? For only 2 white mana, you can destroy any number of target artifacts or enchantments with your Hanata in play because every time you add a new target, it's going to be minusing from the cost. So single X costs work really, really well with Hanata. Double X costs, not so much, and triple X costs, not that good at all, in my opinion. And in order to figure this out, really all you have to do is the math, which is what I did in that Deck Doctor video where I discovered, hey, actually this is maybe not such a great fit, right? So Crackle with Power deals 5 times X damage to each of up to X targets. So let's say we want X to be 5, right? I want to deal 5 times X damage to 5 targets. That seems pretty fantastic. So X is going to be 5. So that means 5 times 3 is 15 plus 2, that's 17 mana. It will allow me to do 25 damage to 5 different targets. That's pretty good. But 17, wow, that's a lot of mana, right? That's essentially game ending with pretty much any other X spell. You could pretty much end the game with 17 mana. Here, it's not likely you're going to. And with your Hanata in play, there isn't a huge advantage here, right? You're basically just minusing off one of the X's. So even with Hanata in play, this is still going to be 5 and 5 and 2. It's still going to be 12 mana. 12 mana, that's a lot. There's very few spells in the entire game of Magic that cost more than 12 mana, right? If we start going down, the numbers don't improve that much. If I just say want to hit all 3 of my opponents with damage, so now I have 3 targets, so now it's 5 times 3 to 3 different targets, that's going to be 15 damage. That's pretty good, going 15 damage to the face of each of my opponents. And even with Hanata in play, again, it's 3 plus 3 plus 2, that's 8 total mana to do 15 damage to each of my opponents. Even that doesn't seem great, right? It's okay, but it's not fantastic. I just think there is a lot of way better X spells that you could be putting in your Hanata decks, and Crackle with Power is currently in 56% of all Hanata decks on EDH Rec. That's a lot, right? That's the majority, and I just don't think it's that great of a spell. I think there are way better options. You really want to be looking for things that have just a single X in their casting cost, because essentially the X is free. You can just target as many things as you want, whereas with Crackle with Power, the more targets you have, the worse it gets, which is not what you want at all, right? So that's not necessarily the wrong card in that deck. Definitely does work. I just don't think it's a good option because there are way better ones. But that is it. That is all. Once again, let me know in the comments below if you have any interactions that you've seen out there in the wild when you're playing your Commander games that maybe you're not sure if they work. Again, it doesn't have to be a guarantee. It can be something you're not necessarily sure about it. I'll check it over myself, see whether it works or not, and cover it in the next video. Or any Magic rules questions in general you guys aren't sure about, let me know in the comments below, and I will try to cover it in the next video. But that is it for today. Thanks for tuning in.